Ryan Reynolds, the cabin that wouldn't let him leave. When Ryan Reynolds accepted an invitation to spend a weekend at a remote Canadian cabin to prepare for his next role, he thought he'd found the perfect escape from Hollywood's chaos. What he didn't know was that the cabin had been waiting for him, and it had no intention of letting him go. The invitation. It started with an email from Martin Hayes, a location scout Ryan had worked with on 3 previous films. Martin had an impeccable reputation in the industry. If he recommended a location, it was guaranteed to be perfect. The email was simple. Ryan, found the ultimate spot for your character research. Isolated cabin in British Columbia, 2 hours from Vancouver. No cell service, no internet, just you and the wilderness. The owners are friends of mine and they're offering it free for the weekend. Trust me, this place will give you exactly what you need for the role. Let me know if you're interested. M. Ryan was preparing for a psychological thriller where he'd play a man slowly losing his grip on reality while isolated in the wilderness. The role was a departure from his usual work, darker, more intense, with no room for his trademark humor. He needed to understand that isolation, that slow descent into questioning what was real. He replied within an hour, "I'm in. Send me the details." 3 days later, Ryan was driving his rental car up a winding mountain road, watching civilization disappear in his rearview mirror. His wife Blake had been hesitant about him going alone. "You sure you don't want company?" she'd asked that morning. "Or at least take someone with you." "That defeats the purpose," Ryan had explained. "The character is alone. I need to feel that isolation, really understand it. Just promise me you'll check in when you get there. There's no cell service, remember? But I'll be back Sunday night. It's just 2 days." Now, as the road became narrower and the trees grew denser, Ryan was starting to understand Blake's concern. This wasn't just isolated, this was the kind of place where people disappeared in horror movies. The kind of place where help was hours away even if you could call for it. But that was the point, wasn't it? To feel uncomfortable. To push himself out of his comfort zone. The GPS died about 20 minutes before he reached the cabin, but Martin had provided detailed directions. "Turn right at the dead birch tree, continue past the rock formation that looks like a bear. The cabin will be on your left after the bridge." When Ryan finally saw it, he had to admit, Martin had outdone himself. The cabin was perfect. Not too rustic, not too modern. A beautiful A-frame structure with large windows facing a pristine lake, surrounded by dense forest. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone had prepared it for his arrival. Ryan parked and grabbed his bags. As he approached the front door, he noticed something odd. There were no other tire tracks besides his own. If someone had been here to start the fire and prepare the cabin, how had they gotten here and left? He tried the door. Unlocked, as Martin had promised. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Lanterns were lit throughout the single large room. A note sat on the rustic wooden table. "Welcome, Ryan. Everything you need is here. Enjoy your stay. The cabin has been waiting for you. The owners." Something about that last line made Ryan pause. "The cabin has been waiting for you." Odd phrasing, but he shrugged it off. People in remote areas sometimes had their own way of talking. He spent the first hour exploring. The cabin was larger than it looked from outside. The main room combined living area, dining space, and kitchen. A ladder led to a loft bedroom with a surprisingly comfortable-looking bed. There was a bathroom with a shower, fed by a water tank on the roof, according to a helpful note, and a back door that led to a small deck overlooking the lake. Everything was meticulously maintained. Too meticulously, Ryan thought. For a cabin that was supposedly used by various guests, it was almost obsessively clean. No dust anywhere. No signs of previous occupants except. He found them in the closet next to the bathroom. Dozens of journals, dating back decades. The earliest one he could find was from 1987. He opened it at random. "Day 3, I was supposed to leave yesterday, but when I tried to drive away, I found myself back at the cabin. 3 times. It's like the road loops back on itself. This is impossible, but it's happening. Ryan flipped to another page. Day 7, I'm not alone here. I can hear someone moving around at night, but when I look, there's no one. This morning, I found my own handwriting in the journal, entries I don't remember making. They describe things I haven't done yet. How is that possible? He grabbed another journal, this one from 2003. Day 5, the reflection in the lake isn't right. When I look at my reflection, it's me, but it's also not me. It's me at different ages, me as a child, me as an old man, all existing simultaneously. I tried to leave again. The car won't start now. The battery is dead, even though it was fine yesterday. I'm starting to think this place doesn't want me to go. Ryan closed the journal, his hands slightly unsteady. This was clearly some kind of elaborate prank. Martin had probably planted these journals to freak him out, knowing he'd find them. It fit with the dark, psychological theme of the movie he was preparing for. Clever, Martin. Very clever. But as Ryan returned to the main room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The large windows that had seemed so inviting now felt like they were allowing something to look in rather than offering a view out. The first night. Ryan spent the evening trying to relax, telling himself the journals were just a creative touch. He made dinner from the well-stocked pantry, noting that all the food was exactly what he liked, his favorite beer in the fridge, the specific brand of coffee he preferred, even the trail mix he always bought. Martin must have asked Blake what to stock, he reasoned. As darkness fell, the cabin took on a different character. The warm, inviting space became something else. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, seeming to twist and reach when he wasn't looking directly at them. The crackling of the fire sounded almost like whispers. Ryan tried to read one of the books from the shelf, a worn copy of Stephen King's The Shining. Appropriate, he thought with a smirk. But when he opened it, he found handwritten notes in the margins. His own handwriting. That's not possible, he said aloud, and immediately regretted it. His voice sounded wrong in the empty cabin, like it was being absorbed by the walls rather than echoing naturally. The notes described his day in detail, what he'd eaten, where he'd explored, even his thoughts about Blake's concerns that morning. But they were dated 3 years ago. Ryan slammed the book shut. This was going too far. Tomorrow, he was leaving. Character research wasn't worth this level of psychological manipulation. But when he tried to climb the ladder to the loft bedroom, something stopped him. Not physically, there was no barrier. But every time he reached for the ladder, he found himself walking back to the couch instead, as if his body was refusing to obey his mind. After the 4th attempt, he gave up and lay down on the couch. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it was filled with strange dreams. He dreamed he was standing at the lake, watching himself in the reflection. But the reflection was doing things he wasn't, turning away, walking into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. He tried to call out, to warn his reflection, but no sound came out. Then the reflection climbed out of the lake and started walking toward the cabin, dripping wet, leaving footprints that steamed in the cold air. And Ryan realized with horror that he was now the one in the lake, the one trapped in the reflection, watching himself walk away. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat despite the cold cabin. The fire had died to embers. And standing in front of the largest window, silhouetted against the moonlight, was a figure. Ryan's heart seized. Who's there? The figure didn't move. Didn't respond. Ryan fumbled for the lantern on the side table and turned it up. The increased light revealed nothing. No one was there. But on the window, fogged by condensation, someone had drawn a simple message, stay. Day 2, the loop. Ryan didn't wait for sunrise. At first light, he packed his bag, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. The journals, the strange occurrences, the figure in the night, enough was enough. He'd text Martin later with some excuse about a family emergency. But when he opened the front door, he found himself looking at the back door. He was standing inside the cabin, facing the deck and the lake. What the hell? He turned around. The back door was behind him now, and the front door was ahead. He walked toward the front door, opened it, and found himself at the back door again. 5 times he tried to leave through the front door. 5 times he ended up at the back door. Okay, he thought, trying to keep his breathing steady. The back door then. He walked to the back door, stepped out onto the deck, and started walking around the cabin toward his car. But as he rounded the corner, he found himself stepping onto the deck from the other direction. The cabin was looping him. Somehow, impossibly, the space around the cabin was folded in on itself. Ryan tried running. Tried closing his eyes and walking straight. Tried following the sound of the road. Nothing worked. Every path, every direction, led him back to the cabin. After an hour of increasingly frantic attempts, he collapsed on the deck, his actor's training keeping him from complete panic, but only barely. "This isn't real," he said aloud. "This is some kind of hallucination. The isolation is getting to me already." But he knew that wasn't true. He'd only been here one night. Isolation didn't work this fast. He went back inside and grabbed one of the journals. The most recent one, dated just 6 months ago. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Day 14, I understand now. The cabin exists in a fold of reality. It's not quite in our world, not quite out of it. Time works differently here. Space works differently. I've seen glimpses of other people, other guests of the cabin, walking around like ghosts. We're all here, but we're all alone. Each trapped in our own version of the cabin, our own slice of time. Sometimes we overlap. Sometimes we can almost touch each other. But we can never truly connect, never truly escape together. The cabin feeds on isolation. On the slow dissolution of identity that comes from being completely alone, completely cut off. And the longer you stay, the more you forget who you were. Until you become part of the cabin itself. Another ghost walking through its rooms, another reflection in its lake. I'm scared I'm forgetting my name. I know I had one. I know I had a life before this. But the details are fading. The cabin is patient. It can wait. And eventually, everyone breaks. Ryan threw the journal across the room. "No," he said firmly. "This is not happening. I am Ryan Reynolds. I'm an actor. I have a wife named Blake. I have children. I have a life. And I am leaving this cabin today." He went to his car. The keys were in his pocket where he'd left them. He got in, started the engine, and began driving down the road. This time, he'd make it. This time, he'd break the loop. But after 10 minutes of driving, he saw it ahead, the cabin. He was approaching it from the opposite direction, but it was the same cabin. He drove past it, kept going. 10 minutes later, there it was again. He drove for an hour, the gas gauge steadily dropping. Every 10 minutes, like clockwork, he passed the cabin. When the gas gauge hit empty, he finally stopped. He was, inevitably, right back at the cabin. The other guests. That afternoon, Ryan saw her for the first time. A woman standing at the edge of the lake, dressed in clothing from the 1950s. She was looking out at the water, completely still, like a photograph. Ryan ran toward her. "Hey! Hello! Can you hear me?" She didn't respond. Didn't even seem to notice him. He reached out to touch her shoulder, and his hand passed through her like she was made of smoke. She flickered, like a bad TV signal, and then was gone. Over the next few hours, Ryan saw more of them. A man in hiking gear from the 1990s, sitting at the table, writing in a journal that Ryan could see was filled with blank pages. A child in modern clothes, playing with toys that weren't there, laughing silently. They were ghosts. Or echoes. Imprints of the cabin's previous guests, trapped in moments of their stays, endlessly repeating. Ryan found himself wondering, how long until he became one of them? How long until he was just another phantom, endlessly repeating some mundane action for future guests to witness? That night, he did something radical. He stopped trying to escape. Instead, he started to explore. If he was stuck here, he needed to understand this place. He needed to find out what it wanted, what it was. He started with the journals, reading them systematically. A pattern emerged. Every guest experienced the same progression. Day 1, arrival. Everything seems fine. Day 2 to 3, attempts to leave. The loop is discovered. Day 4 to 7, panic. Desperate escape attempts. Seeing the phantoms. Day 8 to 14, research. Trying to understand. Day 15 plus, things got weird. The entries became disjointed, confused. Handwriting changed. Personalities seemed to fragment. Many journals ended abruptly. A few lasted months. One went on for what the writer claimed was years, though the dates suggested only weeks had passed. The longest journal, from someone who signed only as M, contained a revelation. I figured it out. The cabin isn't haunted. The cabin isn't evil. The cabin is alive. It's a living entity that exists partially in our dimension and partially in others. It feeds on temporal energy, the potential of what could have been, what might be. Every person who stays here represents thousands of possible timelines, possible versions of themselves. The cabin traps us here and feeds on those possibilities, draining them away until we're left with just one timeline, one version of ourselves. And then it absorbs that too. But here's the thing, if the cabin feeds on possibilities, on potential, then the key to escaping might be to become someone the cabin has already consumed. To eliminate your own future, your own potential. To make yourself worthless to it. The entry ended there, mid-thought, as if the writer had simply stopped existing while writing. The revelation. On what Ryan estimated was his 4th day, though time had become slippery, his watch had stopped, and the sun seemed to rise and set at irregular intervals, he had a breakthrough. He was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to remember his lines from his last movie, when he noticed something. His reflection was slightly off. Not in an obvious way, but in tiny details. The reflection smiled before he did. Blinked at different intervals. And when he looked closely, the eyes were wrong, too knowing, too old. "You're not me," Ryan said to the reflection. The reflection smiled wider. "Aren't I?" Ryan stumbled backward, but the reflection kept talking, its mouth moving even though Ryan couldn't hear through the mirror anymore. He grabbed a towel and covered the mirror. But mirrors weren't the only reflective surfaces. There was the lake, the windows, even the polished wood of the table. And in each reflection, a slightly different Ryan looked back. Some younger, some older. Some grinning mischievously. Some screaming silently. Some simply staring with empty eyes. He understood then. The journals had been right. The cabin was collecting versions of him, every possible Ryan Reynolds from every possible timeline. And as it collected them, it was draining away his own possibilities, his own futures, leaving him with less and less until there would be nothing left but an empty shell for the cabin to add to its collection. But there was one thing the journal writer M hadn't considered. Something that Ryan, as an actor, understood instinctively. Identity wasn't fixed. Identity was performance. He'd made a career out of becoming different people, of putting on and taking off personalities like costumes. If the cabin was trying to trap Ryan Reynolds, then the solution was simple. Stop being Ryan Reynolds. The performance. Ryan spent the next day, or what he thought was a day, systematically dismantling his own identity. He went through his wallet and threw his ID into the fire. Credit cards, photos of Blake and the kids, everything that proved he was Ryan Reynolds went into the flames. He stopped answering to the name. When the reflections called Ryan, he didn't respond. He changed his walk, his mannerisms, his speech patterns. He became someone else. Not a character from one of his movies, but someone new. Someone the cabin wouldn't recognize. He stopped thinking about his past, his career, his life. When memories surfaced, he pushed them down, locked them away. He gave himself a new name, John. John Nobody. Just another person. Unremarkable. Unimportant. The cabin fought back. The reflections became more insistent, more aggressive. At night, he'd wake to find them surrounding his couch, dozens of Ryan Reynolds variants, all reaching for him, all trying to pull him into their world. "You can't escape yourself," they whispered in unison. "We are you. You are us. We are what you were, what you are, what you'll be." "I'm not Ryan Reynolds," he said firmly. "Ryan Reynolds is gone. I'm nobody." And slowly, impossibly, it began to work. The reflections became less frequent. The loop around the cabin loosened slightly. He could walk farther before being turned around. The phantom guests began to acknowledge him, as if he was becoming visible to them now that he'd stepped outside his own identity. One of them, the woman from the 1950s, finally spoke to him. "You're doing it wrong," she said, her voice distant and echoing. "You can't escape by erasing yourself. That's what it wants. That's how it wins. Then what do I do? You have to go deeper. Into the cabin itself. Into its heart. That's where the anchor is. That's what keeps us all here." "Where's the heart?" She pointed at the lake. "Down there. Where all reflections come from. The descent." The lake was freezing. Ryan, no, he reminded himself, John, he was John now, stripped down to his underwear and waded in. The phantom woman was right. This was the only way. As soon as the water reached his chest, he felt it, a pull, like a riptide, but going down instead of out. He took a deep breath and dove. The lake should have been maybe 20 feet deep. But Ryan dove 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet, and there was no bottom. The water grew darker, colder, pressing in on him from all sides. His lungs began to burn. He needed to surface. But when he looked up, the surface was impossibly far away, a faint square of light that seemed to be getting smaller. Just when he thought he'd drown, his hand touched something solid. Not the lake bottom, but something else. Something that felt like wood. He grabbed it and pulled himself toward it, his vision starting to blur from lack of oxygen. It was a door. An old, wooden door, floating in the middle of the lake, or embedded in it, or existing in some space that was neither water nor not water. With the last of his strength, Ryan turned the handle and pushed through. He fell, gasping, onto a wooden floor. Not wet, despite having just been underwater. He was in a room, a single circular room with walls covered in mirrors. Thousands of mirrors, each showing a different version of him. Different ages, different lives, different choices. In the center of the room stood a figure. It wore Ryan's face but was clearly not human. Its skin had the grain of wood, its eyes were windows into nothing, and when it spoke, its voice echoed as if coming from every mirror at once. "Welcome home, Ryan Reynolds," it said. "Or should I say, welcome home, John Nobody. Did you really think changing your name would fool me? I am the cabin. I am every place you've ever felt trapped. Every moment you've wanted to escape yourself. I am the cost of fame, the price of success, the weight of expectations. I am everything you run from. And you cannot escape me because I am you." Ryan stood slowly, trying to ignore his shaking legs. "If you're me, then you know I don't give up easily." "Oh, but you do. You gave up being yourself. You threw your identity away. You became nobody. That's giving up." "No," Ryan said, a realization crystallizing in his mind. "That was learning. See, I've spent my whole life being Ryan Reynolds, the actor, the celebrity, the public persona. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that Ryan Reynolds is just a role I play. Underneath that, I'm still just a kid from Vancouver who liked making people laugh. The real me isn't the sum of my roles or my fame or my identity. The real me is the part that chooses to play those roles." The cabin creature laughed. A pretty speech. But it changes nothing. You're still trapped. Am I? Ryan walked toward the nearest mirror. You collect versions of people. You feed on their potential, their possible selves. But you made a mistake with me. I'm an actor. I literally become different people for a living. You can't trap all my possible selves because I've trained myself to be able to become anyone. Your collection is incomplete and always will be. He smashed the mirror with his fist. Pain shot through his hand, blood welled up, but the mirror shattered. Behind it was another mirror, and another, infinite mirrors receding into infinity. You can break them all, the creature said. There will always be more. Infinite reflections. Infinite versions. Infinite choices, Ryan interrupted. Yeah, I get it. That's the point. You trap people by showing them all the things they could have been, all the lives they didn't live, all the choices they didn't make. You drown them in regret and possibility. But I choose to live with my choices. I choose the life I have. I choose to be Ryan Reynolds, actor, husband, father, not because it's the only possibility, but because it's the one I want. He smashed another mirror, and another. With each one, the room grew brighter. The creature began to flicker, losing solidity. You can't, it started. I can, Ryan said. Because you're not real. You're just my own doubts and fears given form. You're the voice that says I'm not good enough, that I made the wrong choices, that I should have been something else. And I'm done listening to that voice. He smashed mirrors systematically, methodically, not in anger but with purpose. Each broken reflection felt like shedding a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. The room began to collapse. Water rushed in, or maybe rushed out. Ryan couldn't tell anymore. The boundaries between the room, the lake, and reality itself were dissolving. The last thing he heard was the creature's voice, fading, others will come. They always do. The cabin will wait. It's patient. It can wait forever. Then water filled his lungs, and everything went black. The return. Ryan woke up on the shore of the lake, coughing up water, his entire body aching. The sun was setting, or rising, he couldn't tell. He staggered to his feet and looked at the cabin. It was different now. Less solid somehow. He could see through the walls to the forest beyond. The building flickered like a heat mirage. His car was still parked out front. He walked to it, half expecting some new trick, some new trap. But the keys worked. The engine started. And when he began driving down the road, it didn't loop back. After an hour of driving, his phone suddenly buzzed with dozens of notifications flooding in as he re-entered cell coverage. A text from Blake, "Where are you? You've been gone for 3 weeks. We're all worried sick." 3 weeks. He'd been gone 3 weeks, though it had felt like only 5 days. He called Blake immediately. "I'm okay. I'm coming home. I'll explain everything." But could he explain? Would she believe him? Would anyone? Epilogue, 6 months later. Ryan never told the full story publicly. He told Blake everything, and after seeing the look in his eyes, she believed him. Or at least believed that he believed it. He tried to contact Martin Hayes to ask about the cabin, but the strange thing was, Martin claimed he'd never sent any email, never recommended any cabin. His account had been hacked, he said. Someone had used it to send messages to several people. Ryan wasn't the only one who'd received a false invitation. 2 other people had disappeared that same weekend. They were still missing. Ryan hired private investigators to find the cabin. They couldn't. The coordinates Martin's email had provided led to an empty lot. Local records showed no cabin had ever existed there. The property was owned by the provincial government and had been undeveloped wilderness for decades. But Ryan knew it was out there. Waiting. And others would find it, or it would find them. He'd kept one journal from the cabin, the last one he'd written in. In it, he described everything that happened. He ended it with a warning. If you're reading this, you've probably received an invitation to a remote cabin. Maybe it offers the perfect isolation for whatever you're working on. Maybe it seems too good to be true. It is. Don't go. Whatever you're looking for, it's not worth what you'll find there. The cabin offers escape, but what it really provides is a prison. A prison made of all the selves you're not, all the lives you didn't live, all the choices you regret. And once it has you, the only way out is to let go of everything you think makes you who you are. Some people can do that. Most can't. And even if you escape, like I did, you'll never be quite the same. Part of you will always be there, trapped in those reflections, walking those phantom halls, looking for a way out that doesn't exist. Ryan published the journal anonymously online, hoping it would serve as a warning. Most people dismissed it as creative fiction. A few claimed they'd experienced something similar. And every few months, someone would contact him privately, saying they'd received an invitation to a remote cabin from someone they trusted, and did he think it was safe? He always told them the same thing: don't go. Whatever you do, don't go. But people always went anyway. Because the promise of perfect isolation, of escape from the chaos of modern life, was too tempting to resist. The cabin was patient. It could wait. And there would always be someone looking for what it offered, a chance to escape themselves. Even if the cost was becoming trapped in that escape forever. The investigation. But Ryan couldn't let it go. The missing people haunted him. If he'd escaped, maybe there was a way to help them escape too. 3 months after his return, Ryan assembled a team. He told them he was researching a new project, a documentary about urban legends and disappearances. Which was technically true. The team included Marcus Chen, a paranormal investigator with a physics PhD who approached the supernatural with scientific rigor. When Ryan showed him the journal, Marcus didn't dismiss it. Instead, he pulled out a worn folder full of similar accounts. Liminal spaces, Marcus explained. Places that exist between states. Between destinations. They're rare, but they exist. Gas stations that appear on empty highways only when you're lost. Staircases in the woods that lead nowhere. And cabins that trap people in loops of time and possibility. Sarah Kim, a tech specialist who'd worked in satellite imagery and data analysis. If the cabin was real, she could find it. And Father Michael Torres, a priest who specialized in extreme cases, the ones the church didn't like to talk about publicly. He brought texts in Latin, Greek, and languages Ryan didn't recognize. These places aren't possessed, Father Torres explained. They're worse. They're wounds in reality. Places where the fabric of existence has torn, and something else bleeds through. They started with Martin Hayes' compromised email account. Sarah traced the actual source, a burner email created just hours before Ryan received the invitation, routed through servers in 7 different countries. Whoever sent this knew how to hide their tracks, Sarah said. But they made one mistake. They accessed Martin's account from a physical location. She pulled up a map. A library in Hope, British Columbia. Small town, population 6,000. That's only about 40 minutes from where I thought the cabin was, Ryan said. They drove to Hope. The library was old, filled with local history. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, no relation to Marcus, recognized Ryan immediately. "Oh, you're that actor," she said with a smile. Then her smile faded. "You're here about the cabin, aren't you?" The team exchanged glances. "How did you know?" Ryan asked. Mrs. Chen sighed. "Because every few years, someone comes asking. Usually after someone disappears. The cabin has been taking people for decades. Maybe longer. The local indigenous community has stories about it going back centuries. They call it the place that remembers. They say it existed before the Europeans came, that it's not a human structure at all but something that took that form to lure people in." She led them to a back room filled with archives. "I've been keeping records. Every disappearance connected to the area. Every strange story. Every warning that got ignored. She pulled out a massive binder. 73 people in the last 50 years. That we know of. The number is probably higher. Ryan flipped through the pages. Faces stared back at him. Men, women, different ages, different backgrounds. But they all had one thing in common. They'd all received invitations to a perfect, isolated cabin. Why hasn't anyone done anything? Marcus asked. Because there's no evidence, Mrs. Chen said. The cabin doesn't show up on any maps or satellite imagery. Search parties find nothing. And the few people who've escaped. She looked at Ryan. They're never quite the same, are they? They have trouble convincing anyone what happened was real. I'm real, Ryan said. And I'm going to find this thing. Mrs. Chen grabbed his arm. Mr. Reynolds, I've watched dozens of people go looking for that cabin over the years. The ones who go searching for it. They don't come back. The cabin only releases people it's finished with. If you go looking for it, it will know. And it will be ready. I have to try, Ryan said. There are people still trapped there. Then at least take this. Mrs. Chen went to a locked drawer and pulled out a worn leather journal. This belonged to my grandmother. She was a shaman in the indigenous community here. She spent her life studying the cabin, trying to find a way to destroy it. She died before she could, but her research might help you. The grandmother's journal. That night, in their hotel room in Hope, Ryan read the grandmother's journal while his team prepared their equipment. The grandmother, whose name was Simca, had written in a combination of English and her native language, which Father Torres helped translate. Her entries spanned from 1947 to 1995. The earliest entry was chilling. I have seen the place that remembers for the first time. It appeared on the edge of our territory, a cabin that wasn't there the week before. I knew immediately what it was. My grandmother had told me stories. Every generation, it appears somewhere new, drawn to places of isolation and transition. It feeds on the liminal moments in people's lives, those times when they're between one identity and another, one state of being and the next. The cabin is a predator, but not in the way animals are predators. It doesn't kill for sustenance, it collects. Every person who enters becomes part of its collection, their potential selves harvested and stored like specimens. The cabin grows stronger with each addition, its influence spreading. My grandmother said the cabin can be hurt, but not destroyed. It exists partially in our world and partially in the space between possibilities. To destroy it completely, one would have to collapse all possibilities into a single certainty. But doing so would also collapse the person attempting it. The cost is always too high. Later entries documented Simca's experiments with protecting people from the cabin's influence. I've discovered that certain patterns can create temporary shields. The cabin feeds on potential, on uncertainty. Things that are completely certain, mathematical constants, natural laws, absolute truths, create small pockets of resistance. I've been carving protective symbols based on these constants. They don't stop the cabin, but they slow it down, give people more time to escape. The symbol must be carved into your own flesh to work. The pain and permanence make it certain in a way that other protections aren't. I tested this on myself. The cabin cannot fully perceive me anymore. I am a blank spot to it. But the cost was high. I can never fully sleep now, never fully rest. Part of me must always remain alert, always remain certain of who I am. The final entry was dated a week before her death. I'm dying. Cancer, the doctors say. Ironic that after all these years of studying the cabin, something as mundane as disease will kill me. But I've learned something important in my final days. The cabin cannot take those who are complete. Those who have truly accepted their entire self, past, present, and future. The cabin feeds on doubt, on regret, on the what-ifs of life. A person who is reconciled with their choices, who understands that every path not taken was still part of making them who they are, such a person becomes invisible to the cabin. Not because they have no possibilities, but because they've integrated all possibilities into their singular, certain self. This is what I pass on to whoever reads this: you cannot fight the cabin with force. You cannot escape it by running. You can only transcend it by becoming so completely yourself that you leave no cracks for it to enter. Be certain. Be whole. Be complete. That is the only protection that lasts. Ryan closed the journal, his hands shaking. She figured it out. She actually figured out how to beat it. Marcus looked up from his equipment. Beat what? The cabin? How to become invisible to it. How to protect yourself permanently. Ryan explained Simca's theory about certainty and completeness. Father Torres nodded thoughtfully. It aligns with certain religious teachings. Know thyself isn't just philosophical advice, it's practical protection. The demons and dark forces of old couldn't touch those who were certain of their identity in God. But Ryan, Sarah said carefully, you already escaped once. Why go back? Because 2 people are still missing. They went there the same weekend I did. And according to Simca's journal, time moves differently in the cabin. For them, it might have been months or years. I can't leave them there. Marcus pulled out a device that looked like a modified GPS unit. I might have a way to find it. If the cabin exists partially outside normal space, it should create detectable distortions in GPS signals, gravitational fields, even radio waves. I've been mapping anomalies in the area for the past 2 days. He showed them a laptop screen covered in data points. There. This pocket of space where all signals go haywire. It's about 30 miles northeast of here. That's deep in the wilderness, Sarah said. No roads, barely any trails. We have to hike in. Then we hike, Ryan said. The return journey. They set out at dawn, equipped with hiking gear, Marcus's detection equipment, Father Torres's religious texts, Sarah's communication devices, and something Ryan had commissioned based on Simca's journal, protective symbols carved into small titanium plates. Simca carved them into her skin, Marcus noted. Will these work if they're not part of us? We won't know until we try, Ryan admitted. But I'm not asking anyone to carve symbols into their flesh unless absolutely necessary. The hike took 6 hours. The forest grew denser, darker. Marcus's equipment went haywire as they approached the anomaly zone, compasses spinning wildly, GPS coordinates jumping thousands of miles, radio frequencies mixing impossibly. We're close, Marcus said, his voice tight with equal parts fear and excitement. The spatial distortions are off the charts. And then they saw it. The cabin, exactly as Ryan remembered it. Beautiful A-frame structure, large windows, smoke curling from the chimney. It looks so normal, Sarah whispered. That's how it gets you, Ryan replied. They approached cautiously. Father Torres began reciting prayers in Latin. Sarah documented everything with multiple cameras. Marcus held up his detection devices, which were now screaming with alerts. The front door was unlocked, just as it had been for Ryan. Inside, the cabin was warm, welcoming, identical to Ryan's memory. Except for one thing, there were people inside. Not the phantom guests Ryan had seen before, but solid, real people. A middle-aged man sat at the table, writing in a journal. A young woman stood by the window, staring out at the lake. Neither reacted to the team's entrance. Hello? Ryan called out. Can you hear us? The man looked up. His eyes were empty, glazed. Day 73, he said in a monotone. Or is it 74? I forget. The cabin provides. The cabin protects. I don't need to leave. Why would I leave? Because you're trapped, Ryan said, approaching carefully. Your name is David Chen, right? You've been missing for 3 weeks. Weeks? The man laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Months. Years. Time doesn't work here. I've lived lifetimes in this place. I've been every version of myself. Why would I want to go back to being just one? The woman at the window finally turned. Ryan recognized her from Mrs. Chen's binder. Jennifer Martinez disappeared the same weekend as him. "You're Ryan Reynolds," she said. "I've seen you. In the reflections. You escaped." "I did. And I came back to help you escape too." "There is no escape," David said, returning to his journal. "There's only acceptance. The cabin showed me all the lives I could have lived. All the better versions of myself. Why go back to being the failed version when I can be all of them?" Marcus stepped forward. "You're not actually being all of them. The cabin is draining you. Every version of yourself it shows you is another piece of your potential it's stealing. Eventually, there'll be nothing left but an empty shell." "Then I'll be at peace," David said. Ryan realized David was too far gone. The cabin had already taken too much of him. But Jennifer, she was still fighting. He could see it in her eyes, the spark of resistance. "Jennifer," Ryan said gently. "How long have you been here? By your reckoning?" 6 months, she whispered. "Maybe more. I tried to leave so many times." "But David." She looked at the man at the table. He stopped trying. He started saying the cabin was better than real life. And I was so lonely, so tired of fighting alone, that I almost believed him. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," Sarah said, approaching slowly. "We're here. We can help you leave." "But you can't leave," Jennifer said, and there was desperation in her voice now. "Nobody leaves. The cabin won't let you. You'll try to walk out that door and you'll just end up back here. Over and over. Forever." "I left once," Ryan said. "I can do it again. But I need you to trust me." From the corner of the room, David laughed again. "Ryan Reynolds thinks he left. Ryan Reynolds thinks he escaped. But look around, Ryan. How do you know you ever really left? How do you know the last 6 months weren't just another layer of the cabin's illusion? Maybe you're still here. Maybe you never left. Maybe everything you remember, your wife, your life, your career, is just another reflection. Another possibility the cabin is showing you." Ryan felt a chill. The thought had occurred to him in the dark hours of the night. What if his escape had been just another trap? But then he remembered Simka's words. Be certain. Be whole. Be complete. "I know I left," Ryan said firmly, "because I chose to leave. And I choose to be who I am. Not who I might have been, not who I could be, but who I actually am." Ryan Reynolds. Actor. Husband. Father. Imperfect, flawed, but real. And that certainty is what the cabin can't touch. He pulled out the titanium plate with Simca's symbols. These are protection. They're based on absolute certainties, mathematical constants that can't be changed. While you're holding these, the cabin's influence is reduced. Not eliminated, but reduced. Enough to give you a chance. He handed one to Jennifer. She took it, and immediately her eyes cleared slightly, as if a fog was lifting. I can think more clearly," she said. "Oh God, it's been in my head this whole time, hasn't it? Whispering. Making me doubt everything." "That's what it does," Ryan said. "But we're leaving now. All of us." "Not me," David said calmly. "I'm staying. I'm happy here." Father Torres approached him. "Son, you're not happy. You're hollowed out. The cabin has taken your identity and replaced it with emptiness masquerading as peace." "I don't care," David said. "Peace is peace." Marcus checked his devices. "Ryan, we have a problem. The spatial distortions are intensifying. It's like the cabin knows we're trying to take Jennifer out. It's fighting back." The cabin began to change. The walls shifted, becoming translucent. Through them, Ryan could see infinite versions of the room, all slightly different. In some, David was standing. In others, he was gone. In one, Jennifer was already dead. In another, Ryan had never arrived. "It's showing us possibilities," Father Torres said, his voice awed and terrified. "All the ways this could go." "Then we need to make a choice," Ryan said. "A certain choice. One possibility, committed to completely." "Marcus, Sarah, Father Torres, do you trust me?" They nodded. "Then follow my lead. Don't look at the other possibilities. Don't consider other options. We walk out that door, we get in our cars, we drive away. That's what happens. That's the only thing that happens. Be absolutely certain of it." Ryan took Jennifer's hand. She was shaking but nodded. He started walking toward the door, the team following. The cabin roared around them, if a building could roar. The walls rippled. The floor tilted. Phantom versions of themselves appeared, blocking the path, showing them dying, staying, failing. But Ryan kept walking. One foot in front of the other. Absolutely certain. They reached the door. Ryan opened it. On the other side was not the forest, but the lake. Water lapped at the threshold. "It's trying to confuse us," Marcus said. "Spatial distortion. The door should lead outside, but—" "This is outside," Ryan said firmly. "This is the way out. Walk through." He stepped into the water, pulling Jennifer with him. Instead of sinking, they found solid ground. The water was an illusion, a test. One by one, the team followed. Behind them, David's voice called out, faint and fading, "You'll be back." They always come back. The cabin is patient. It can wait. They emerged into the forest, the cabin visible behind them through the trees. Marcus immediately checked their position. "We're 3 miles from where we started the hike. The cabin moved us, or we moved through space, or I don't even know anymore." "Let's not wait to find out," Sarah said. "We need to move. Now." They ran. The aftermath. The hike back was faster, fueled by adrenaline and fear. Jennifer was weak, malnourished, but the protective plate seemed to give her strength. Or maybe just clarity enough to keep moving. When they finally reached their vehicles, the sun was setting. Jennifer collapsed into the car, crying with relief. "Is it really over?" she asked. "Am I really out?" "You're out," Ryan confirmed. "But we need to get you to a hospital, and then we need to report this properly." The problem, as they discovered over the next few days, was that no one believed them. Jennifer had been gone for 3 weeks, but claimed 6 months. Medical examination showed signs of extended malnutrition consistent with her timeline, not the official timeline. David Chen remained missing. Search parties found nothing. The coordinates where Marcus's equipment had detected the anomaly now showed normal readings. The cabin had moved, or hidden itself, or perhaps had never been there at all in any way provable to authorities. Ryan used his influence to keep the story out of the press, but rumors spread anyway. Conspiracy theories about him having a breakdown, about Jennifer being in on some publicity stunt, about the whole thing being viral marketing for a movie. But Mrs. Chen in the library believed them. And Father Torres documented everything for the church's private archives. And Marcus published a paper on spatial anomalies that was dismissed by mainstream science but gained a cult following in fringe circles. And Jennifer, after months of therapy, started a blog warning others about isolated locations that seemed too perfect, invitations that seemed too good to be true. Most people didn't believe her. But a few did. And occasionally, someone would contact her saying, "I got an invitation. Should I go?" And she would always say, "No. Whatever you do, don't go." 1 year later. Ryan was filming a movie in Toronto when he got the call. It was Marcus. "Ryan, I need you to see something." They met at a coffee shop. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I've been tracking patterns," Marcus said, spreading out maps and data. "Disappearances fitting the cabin's profile. They're not random. There's a pattern. The cabin appears in places where ley lines intersect, where natural geography creates liminal spaces. And here's the thing, it's appearing more frequently. 10 years ago, one appearance every 6 months. 5 years ago, one every 3 months. Now, we're seeing indicators every few weeks. It's getting stronger, Ryan said. Or there's more than one, Marcus replied. What if the original cabin was just the first? What if it's reproducing? Creating copies of itself? Ryan felt cold. If that's true, then saving 1 or 2 people doesn't matter. We need to find a way to stop it permanently. That's why I called. I think I found something in Simka's research that she didn't fully explore. She said the cabin can be hurt but not destroyed. But what if we're not trying to destroy it? What if we're trying to starve it? Marcus pulled out a complex diagram. The cabin feeds on people's potential selves, on uncertainty and possibility. But what if we created a space of such absolute certainty that the cabin couldn't perceive it? A blind spot in reality. And what if we used that blind spot to effectively wall off the cabin from potential victims? How would that even work? I'm not entirely sure yet. But I've been consulting with physicists, mathematicians, even philosophers. The theory is sound. The application. He laughed nervously. That's where it gets tricky. We'd need someone willing to anchor the space. To become so absolutely certain of themselves that they create a field of certainty around them. Permanently. That sounds like what Simka did. Exactly. But she did it for herself, created a personal shield. What I'm talking about is larger scale. A certainty so complete it affects the space around the cabin, makes it invisible to potential victims. They'd walk right past it without noticing. What would it cost? Marcus hesitated. Based on Simka's accounts? The person anchoring the certainty field would have to give up uncertainty forever. No more possibilities. No more what-ifs. They'd know, absolutely, who they are and who they'll always be. No potential for change or growth. They'd be frozen, in a sense, in their current identity. Ryan thought about that. As an actor, his entire career was built on possibility, on becoming different people, exploring different identities. To give that up, to lock himself into a single, unchangeable self. Let me think about it, Ryan said. But even as he said it, he knew what he'd decide. Because 2 people were still trapped in that cabin, David Chen and whoever else had been taken in the years since. And more would be taken if nothing was done. The final choice. 3 months later, Ryan stood at the edge of the anomaly zone. With him were Marcus, Father Torres, and a team of specialists Marcus had assembled, people who believed, who understood. Jennifer was there too, watching from a safe distance. She'd insisted on coming, on being part of stopping the thing that had nearly destroyed her. Ryan was prepared. He'd spent 3 months working with meditation experts, therapists, and spiritual advisors from multiple traditions. All helping him do one thing, become absolutely certain of who he was. Not Ryan Reynolds the actor. Not Ryan Reynolds the celebrity. But the man underneath all that. The person he'd always been and always would be. The kid from Vancouver who'd dreamed of making people laugh. The man who'd built a life and family. The person who'd looked into the abyss of the cabin and chosen to remain himself. The protective symbols weren't on titanium plates this time. They were tattooed on his skin, permanent markers of permanent certainty. You don't have to do this, Marcus said for the 100th time. We can find another way. There isn't another way, Ryan replied. You said it yourself, someone has to anchor the certainty field. It might as well be me. I've already faced the cabin once. I know what I'm up against. Father Torres performed a blessing. Jennifer hugged him, crying. Marcus ran through the technical details one last time. And then Ryan walked toward the cabin. It appeared before him, materializing out of the forest like it had been waiting. The door stood open, welcoming. Ryan didn't enter. That wasn't the plan. Instead, he sat down on the ground about 30 feet from the cabin. The boundary where Marcus's measurements showed the cabin's influence began. And he meditated. Not to empty his mind, but to fill it. With absolute certainty about who he was. Every moment of his life, every choice he'd made, every path he'd taken. Not regretting the roads not taken, but accepting that those roads were part of what made him who he was. Ryan Reynolds. Husband to Blake. Father to his children. Actor who made people laugh and sometimes cry. Imperfect. Flawed. But completely, entirely himself. The certainty grew within him, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Marcus's instruments went crazy. It's working, Marcus breathed. The distortion field is shrinking. The cabin's influence is contracting. Inside the cabin, David Chin looked up from his journal, confusion on his empty face. The whispers that had kept him placid for so long were fading. What's happening? He asked the empty room. Ryan pushed harder, his certainty becoming a wall, a barrier. He could feel the cabin pushing back, trying to show him other possibilities, other versions of himself. But he rejected them all. Not because they were wrong, but because they weren't what he chose. And the cabin began to fade. Not disappearing entirely, but becoming translucent, less real. Like a photograph losing its color, a memory losing its clarity. It's working. Sarah shouted from the monitoring station. The spatial readings are normalizing. The anomaly is. It's not gone, but it's weaker. Much weaker. Inside the cabin, David Chin felt his mind clearing for the first time in over a year. The fog lifted. The whispers stopped. And he stumbled toward the door, which suddenly seemed like a real door again instead of a portal to nowhere. He emerged into the forest, blinking in the sunlight, and saw Ryan sitting cross-legged on the ground, surrounded by equipment and people. "I'm out," David whispered. Jennifer ran to him, helped him walk away from the cabin. Marcus and Father Torres immediately began checking him over. Ryan opened his eyes. The cabin was still there, but barely. A ghost of a building. And he could feel the certainty field holding, a permanent barrier between the cabin and the world. "Is it over?" he asked Marcus. "For this cabin, yes," Marcus replied, checking his readings. "The field is stable. The cabin can't reach out anymore. It's trapped in its own pocket of space. Anyone who approaches will feel an instinctive need to avoid this area. The certainty field creates a psychological boundary." "But there are other cabins," Ryan said. "You said they're multiplying." "One problem at a time," Marcus said. "You've saved everyone who might have been taken by this one. That's not nothing." Ryan stood up, feeling strangely light. The certainty he'd built wasn't a burden, it was a foundation. He knew exactly who he was now, with no doubts, no what-ifs. Part of him mourned the loss of possibility, of potential. But another part felt free. "So what now?" Jennifer asked. Ryan looked at his team, at the people who believed him, helped him, risked everything to fight something most people didn't even know existed. "Now we do this again," he said. "For the other cabins. For all the other places that trap people in their own possibilities. We map them, we anchor them, we save who we can." "That's a hell of a second career," Marcus said with a smile. "Better than most sequels," Ryan replied, and was surprised to find he could still joke. The certainty hadn't taken his humor, just given it a foundation of complete self-knowledge. They packed up their equipment as David and Jennifer were loaded into an ambulance. David would face a long recovery, but at least he was free. As they walked back to their vehicles, Ryan looked back once at the cabin. It was barely visible now, a shimmer in the air, a suggestion of a structure rather than a real building. "Think it'll stay contained?" Sarah asked. "As long as I do," Ryan replied. "The certainty field is anchored to me. As long as I remain certain of who I am, the cabin stays trapped." "And if you ever doubt yourself?" Ryan smiled. Then I guess we'll find out just how permanent really is. But I don't plan to find out. They drove away, leaving the cabin behind. Trapped. Starved. Harmless, at least for now. But Ryan knew this was just the beginning. Marcus had mapped dozens of other anomalies. Dozens of other places where reality cracked and something hungry leaked through. They couldn't save everyone, couldn't stop everything. But they could try. And for Ryan Reynolds, that certainty, the certainty that he would keep fighting, keep helping, keep being exactly who he chose to be, was enough.